Said we're going to be covering the shift rates today, and then we'll come back here into our PowerPoint at the end of the call here to review our other upcoming sessions as well in the next few weeks. We are going to be covering ACA again for anybody that might have missed our first pass at that. Okay, with that being said, hop out of here and get over into the system here. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be covering our shift rates today, the 13th. You can see in our POC, we have our past webinars in here as well. But primarily, we're going to spend time over on the admin side and how to set up the shift rates. But I'm also going to come back into self-service here and there to look at timesheets, enter some time, and have that time be picked up for the actual shift rates themselves and show how that works through payroll. Okay. So in order to set up and get over to the shift rates, you are going to need to have access into the admin side and more specifically into the settings in Criterion on the admin side. So we would start by going to our menu up at the top left, choosing one of the modules to go over into. Usually I like to go over to payroll. And what I like to do is I like to right click and open this in a new tab. So that'll keep me here in self-service and also move us over to this tab here to the admin side. So from here, we would go over to our settings gear in the top right, and our shift rates are going to be found under payroll administration, and down under here, we have shift rates. As a reminder, if you don't necessarily know or maybe haven't used a feature in the system and you're looking for it as a menu item, you could always just type in like so in the menu, and it will filter out all of the different parts of the menu that match what you've entered. So we can go over into shift rates. And one of the first things you'll see here, which we would expect, is that this is set up by employer. So you would choose which employer you're setting this up for. Maybe it applies for one and not others. And then beyond that, you would be able to specify which employees the shift rate is applicable for. So the shift rate will not necessarily be by work location or project or anything like that. It will be based on who the employees are from our employee group and what the hours and configuration of the days of the week are as well. So we start again at the employer level, tell us who, or tell the system who the shift rate will apply for, give it a name. So the name, you can call it whatever you'd like. And then there are the actual definitions of the shift period itself and the setup for what the rate would be and when this will apply. So if I click into this row here, you'll see we get our pop-up, which is where we would configure the relevant shift rate. You can see choose the days of the week, so picking which days it applies to. You would set then a start time and an end time. If you needed it to apply for the full 24 hours, we'd go basically 12 to 12, like so, and that would apply for the full day. Maybe you have something with a weekend or something along those lines, where for any weekend shifts, you would have a certain applied rate for the employees working anytime on the weekends, kind of similar to overtime, where maybe you have a rule that says any hours worked on the weekend over zero are counted as overtime. You might have something similar where all of the time on any given day, any given um, day of the week, and all the times on that day would receive the premium. For our example, though, we're going to start with how this was set up, which is time from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So this is what we're calling, as an example, after hours. So any time worked after 5 p.m. on these days of the week is going to receive a premium to the employee's rate of pay of $5 per hour. And we'll show how that kind of represents itself in the payroll batch, but what you'll end up with is an actual augmented or changed rate of pay for the employee in the actual payroll batch, where they'll have more than one row of their income based on those different rates. So not only can you do the amount premium here, but I also mentioned that you can apply a percentage. So maybe, it's for employees that have different rates of pay, and instead of getting a fixed flat dollar amount, they all have a fixed percentage instead over their base rate of pay. You can have more than one of these rules set up. The only thing that you can't do is you can't have overlapping rules here. So I can't add another record. Say I want to add a percentage. I couldn't add another percentage record that applies on Monday from the same time overall. So I couldn't have this overlap from 5 p.m. even to, let's say, 7 p.m. That would cause a conflict with the existing rule. But you can have an additional time, let's say, that does not overlap. So maybe instead on Monday it's 5 a.m. to, let's say, noon. There's my 12 p.m. Like so. You can have this as an applicable rule because it doesn't overlap for that same day of the week. For the purposes here, I am going to set up an additional rule here for our percentage. We're just going to call this Saturday percent premium to distinguish it from our after hours. And I'm going to set this to be 10 a.m. and we'll say that this goes to 4 p.m. on Saturday. So a little different than the rule I was describing, but this is what I have set up for an example in our timesheet already. So this would be, again, I want to set up a different one. So we're going to call it a percentage, and you'll see it changes the layout in the fields here. And then what we would enter is just 0.2 like this. I want to have a 20% premium for my time on Saturday. So I've added this and add like that. So now we have these days of the week, and then we also have Saturday time as well. Okay, so we can save that. And we have configured and set up a shift rate for our employee group here. So now to see this sort of in action, what we would need to do is we need to have a timesheet and a timesheet filled out with relevant time, matching time here. So what I have is under self-service, I've gone over to my team timesheets. And from team timesheets, I have two different employees here. So I have Chris Beard and Colby Dowdy. These two folks, one of which, Chris Beard, is applicable for the shift rate, and Colby Dowdy, who is not applicable for the shift rate. And that's just to provide a comparison point once we get into the payroll batch itself. So first and foremost, we're going to look at the timesheet for this first period here for Chris. And what we have is standard times here, 8 to 4, 8 to 4, 8 to 4, 8 to 4, etc. And then he has one extra hour and one record here from 5 to 6 p.m. And we can see that that falls on a Friday. So based on our shift rate rules, we would expect that for that Friday, that single hour, he will get a premium of $5 per hour in the payroll batch. The rest of the time will just be paid at the regular flat time, as it does not fall under the shift rate rules themselves. Then for Colby, fairly similar for their timesheet as well. They have just 8 hours on each day. None of their time is applicable for the shift rate to begin with, but they also don't have any time. They are also not eligible for the shift rate itself, so they'll just be paid their flat rate in the payroll batch that we have. Okay. So our timesheets, of course, for those familiar in running payroll, timesheets have to first be approved. So I've submitted and approved the two prior periods here from February 2nd to February 8th. And now we would go back over to the admin side, where we can go over into our payroll maintenance. And we can see we have a couple of batches prepared here for the training session. So nothing out of the ordinary here, just going through our payroll batch, gave it a name, matched up our period to our timesheet, and we hit next. So we already have Chris Beard in here along with Colby Dowdy. Just to kind of show this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove Chris here and add him back just so we can load the timesheet and have you guys see that come in. Okay, so we've added Chris back in. We're going to go back to import our timesheets. See, I've done that a couple times here already. And we'll load this and add to batch. So we see the 6 records, which matches up with the 6 entries in our timesheet. Uh, and now when we calculate, we'll see his gross pay updated. And we'll go in and just look at the employee details here. Reminder, if you haven't seen this or used this in payroll, if you select any of the employees that are in your payroll batch, so whether it's one or selecting all with the top button there, you can hit the view button and it will take you into the employee records. So just to start, we'll notice that there's a second row that's hidden here for this employee and their regular time. And you can see there's no rate displayed as well because there are multiple rates for this employee. And when we go over to Colby here, we can see that they just have their one flat rate for all of their hours and time for the period, the $20 per hour. So going back to Chris Beard here. Now we can see we have our 40 hours at the 35, and we have our single hour at the 40, which is coming from our shift rate premium itself. So maybe pause quickly there. I don't know if there's any questions that have come in while we've been going over it, but maybe now is a good time to see if anybody had any questions, and if there's anything in the QA, we can address that. Okay. Cool. Well, just as a reminder, we have some folks here who are standing by to help and answer questions as they come up. So if you do have anything, you feel free to type in there and we'll be happy to address them. So one other piece of configuration to keep in mind here that I did not cover at the beginning is within the incomes themselves. So you have the ability to actually indicate whether or not an income is eligible to be applicable or under a shift rate. If this label here, shift rate on the income is not included, the shift rate will not end up being applied to that income. So that gives you flexibility in terms of only applying your shift rate to, let's say, worked hours, where you may want to exclude things like vacation or holiday from the actual shift rates where you don't want to give a premium for that time and those hours. So again, relatively similar to whether or not something is eligible for overtime or included in overtime. You can similarly make something eligible or ineligible for shift rates. This is a default system label, so you shouldn't have to add this in the system, but if you don't have it, it's straightforward. It's just shift underscore rate as the label, but that should be in there for anything that's relatively new database wise in terms of when your database was created. But again, if not, it's a simple label, and we'd be happy to help you set that up and apply it to the right incomes if you have any questions or would like to try this out. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go back. I'm going to go back to my shift rate setup, and we're just going to take another quick look at this where we have our Saturday percentage premium here. And the reason I want to add this is we're going to do another quick example of the timesheet for Chris Beard for the next period where I've added time on Saturday for him. And we're going to load that into the payroll batch to show how you can kind of combine the different shift rate setups together into that one rule and have it apply again across different days and different times. So back into self-service and back into our team timesheets, we can see we have again here, Chris Beard, 2/9 to 2/15. And under here, we have some of our regular time. We have a holiday that's mixed in here. And then on Saturday, I've added in 4 hours. So not quite the full period that we've set up as the eligible period for the shift rate, but time that is and would be considered applicable for the shift rate. So our rule is 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and I have 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. here. So what we're going to end up expecting, he doesn't have any time that falls after the 5 o'clock. We can add some actually, so we can get a mix. So we'll go here. We'll go to 5 p.m. and then let's go to 7 p.m. Mix it up a little bit. So now we should have 2 hours with the $5 premium and then 4 hours of the 20% premium. And that'll end up giving us three different income rates for the employee in the batch. So we'll have his regular base rate, we'll have the shift rate that has the flat dollar amount, and then we'll also have a shift rate which is applying a 20% premium. So we'll save this. We'll submit our timesheet. And then because I am signed in as the approver of the timesheet, I can just approve it right here. And we'll just say CQ training approved and approve that. Okay, so now we have our second timesheet period with additional shift rate rules that were not applicable for the first timesheet period. And now we're going to go back over through payroll into the admin side over here. Just gone back into our first payroll batch where, just a reminder, we have our two rates, 35 base and the $40 for that one premium. So what I expect to see here is 20% of this will be $7. So we should have 35, 40, and 42 in our next batch. So we'll close out of that, go back to payroll and into our shift rates training batch number 2. We'll hit next. Have our employees. We actually don't have a timesheet for Colby in this case, so we should only have Chris's timesheet coming in. Go over to import, load timesheets. Again, straightforward steps. This is just the shift rates are additional configuration that can be applied. We'll add to batch and we'll calculate. Okay, and we can see his gross pay has definitely gone up here. And we see a few different rows now here as well. So we have the holiday time, which we saw in the timesheet initially. The holiday time didn't meet any of the shift rate rules, so that's paid at 35. And again, as expected, we now have our various shift rates here. So we have the bulk of the hours at the 35, the 2 hours that we expected at the 40, and the 4 hours that we expected at the $42 per hour. Okay. All right. And so again, dollar amounts, percentages, various employee groups. You'll get some issues or some errors if you set up shift rates that apply. Again, if I have a second one of these and I have overlapping employee groups. So if I set shift rate again and just kind of set all those same rules. So for the Monday through Friday, you might get some conflicts or issues there in terms of overlap. But yeah, so this is all configurable from employee group to employee group. So the least common denominator of who should be in the employee group and receiving the shift rate is how we would apply this. And we'd be happy to work with you in support or with your partners to come up with what those employee group conditions would need to be, whether that's something about their positions, hire dates, anything along those lines, to create employee groups that would be applicable for their shift rates. So this was a little bit of a quicker one than some of our other trainings here today. So again, if there are questions in Q&A, we're on standby here, ready to address and go through that. But just a nice functionality in Criterion that maybe you weren't aware of or maybe you haven't used before. And if you have any interest in doing so, just reach out to us in support and or to your partners, and we're happy to help and get the setup for you. Okay. So I'll go back here. All right. So again, we have coming up, we have our Affordable Care Act reporting for US-based clients. Obviously, shift rates are applicable to anybody and everybody using the system. Some more US-based or US focused for ACA. But then we'll get back right in the first one of March here, back to more broadly applicable settings and topics here for our overtime rules. And then we're also going to get a little bit more into the ESS widgets and calendars. So that'll be an ESS heavy focused training, a little bit less on the admin side, but still some over there. So we look forward to having you guys attend these. And as I said, just reach out if there's any questions or if you'd like to learn more about setting up and using shift rates. And if not, we'll see you guys next time around.